Today we're talking about Joe Biden, but we're putting politics aside. I'm not talking for or against the President of the United States, but I'm taking his personal love affair with something you and I and Biden share in common, and that's cars. In case you weren't aware, Biden is a self-professed car guy.
You all know I'm a car guy.
In his own words, Biden said,
The vehicle should give me so many reasons to be optimistic about the future.
But some say that Biden is actually using this car guy persona to his political advantage. After all, who doesn't like your average American car enthusiast? On an episode of Jay Leno's Garage, you can see Biden pushing his 1967 Corvette Stingray to 118 miles an hour. According to Jay Leno, it's obvious and impressive that Biden is a good driver and can drive stick. Now mind you, Biden is the oldest president in all of U.S. history. You can't deny that having the car guy image does keep him looking down to earth and cool. But others say that Biden does have a sincere love for cars and he's not using it to his advantage. Not many people know this, but Biden's love for cars started with his dad. His father, Joseph Robinette Biden Sr., became a car salesman and major gearhead after the Biden family moved to a 3-bedroom house in Wilmington, Delaware. That was in 1953, the year I was born, and Joe Biden Jr. was around 10 years old. Here, Joe Biden Sr. started selling used cars. But one day, after the store owner dumped a bucket of silver dollars just so he could watch his employees go after them on the dance floor, Biden Sr. left the party and never came back to the dealership. And to his son, that showed how much his father valued dignity and respect. Yet, even though he left that dealership, he still continued working as a car salesman elsewhere. By the time Joe Biden Jr. was attending the University of Delaware, he had already been given different cars from his dad. Evidently, Biden would always pull up in convertible. And according to Fred Sears, Biden's friend, this meant Biden had all his friends beat 8 ways from Sunday when it came to scoring dates. In fact, Biden still owns a 1967 Corvette Stingray that his father gave him as a surprise wedding present. This Goodwood green-colored convertible even appeared alongside President Biden's presidential campaign. We're talking a V8 engine that outputs 350 horsepower and has the ability to reach speeds of 60 miles an hour in just 4.7 seconds. In 1972, Joe Biden Jr.'s wife, Nelia, and their 13-month-old daughter, Naomi, tragically died in a car crash as Biden was preparing to be sworn in for the Senate seat. Despite the deep grief, Biden Jr. decided to continue on his political career path. And to support his son after 1972, his father, Biden Sr., decided to go into real estate. Biden Jr.'s sister, Valerie, said that their father apparently didn't want a U.S. senator to have a used car salesman for a dad, and he wanted to bring dignity to his son's new position. But let's jump forward to the present. Now, I don't know if you recall, but back in 2021, President Biden was vocal about the car electrification revolution. Well, evidently, before gathering car executives at the White House, President Biden asked the staff members which vehicle he should test drive for the cameras. The answer? A hybrid Jeep Wagoneer as long as he drove it on the South Lawn. Presidents are not allowed to drive on the street. David A. Kirsch, professor and author of The Electric Vehicle and the Burden of History, said that it's convenient for senior American politicians to have a favorite American muscle car. It gives off the image of strength that Americans yearn for. Biden's love of cars also spilled into other areas of political decisions. Back when Biden was vice president, the 2009 Recovery Act that he oversaw played a major part in saving the American car industry. Biden helped lead the rollout of a whopping $2 billion in research grants to accelerate development of EV batteries. And when Biden was looking to be re-elected in 2012, he was famous for saying,
Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive.
Talk about mixing cars and politics. Biden knows a thing or two about cars. And so, the White House regularly schedules events at manufacturing facilities owned by GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Just take a look at some of Biden's recent events, and you'll see what I mean. Biden also has leverage in the car industry. When Biden visited Ford in 2021, he test drove the electric F-150 Lightning. And after news reports of the president's test drive went out, Ford received 200,000 reservations for its electric F-150 Lightning. Right now, the U.S. national debt is the highest it's ever been in American history. For the first time ever, the U.S. is now officially over $31 trillion in debt. And it's only getting worse. If you think the national debt won't impact you personally, well, be prepared for a wake-up call. The truth is, as it is right now, more Americans are going deeper into debt for new cars and trucks as vehicle prices remain unusually high. First of all, let's talk about national debt, also known as federal debt or public debt. Basically, it's the amount of money the federal government has borrowed to cover its expenses over time. National debt is similar to a consumer's personal debt in the sense that both are caused by multiple multiple factors. For example, personal debt can rack up due to things like mortgage, car loans, student loans, unpaid credit cards, and so forth. On the other hand, national debt is made up of non-marketable and marketable securities. Non-marketable securities are things like savings bonds that can't be sold to other investors by its holders. Marketable securities are made up of things like treasury bills, bonds, and notes that can be traded in the secondary market, and its ownership can be transferred from one entity or person to another. When the government needs to pay for any deficits incurred during the year, it borrows money by selling marketable securities. All that borrowing year after year translates to what we know as the national debt. If you're wondering why the debt is so high, well, actually, there are more programs and services that the government needs than you might think. And sometimes federal revenues from taxes and so forth alone just won't cut it. Federal revenue can be down, for example, if tax rates have gone down, or if corporations and citizens are just making less money than average. Well, then the government has to look for extra funding. Keep in mind, too, that decreased federal revenue doesn't necessarily mean the government spending will go down. In fact, it's not rare to see increased government spending even though there is decreased federal revenue coming in. So you can see how things can snowball and the debt keeps getting bigger. Here's a question. If U.S. national debt is growing, why does the government keep borrowing? Believe it or not, you may be surprised to learn that this is actually justified in the U.S. Constitution, or at least to a certain degree. The Constitution states that the purpose of the federal government is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. When the government cuts a certain program or service, the consequences can be potentially disastrous and outweighs the dollars saved. If you think the U.S. national debt is a new phenomenon, be prepared to be surprised. Not many people know this, but the fact is, the U.S. has been in debt since July 4th, 1776, when it first declared independence. Initially, it was due to expenses related to American Revolutionary War. By January 1791, the national debt expenses reached $75 million. That's about $2.6 billion in today's dollars. If you consider the U.S. population back then was 2.5 million, it means debt equal to about $1,040 per U.S. person in today's dollars. Compare that to almost $93,000 per U.S. citizen right now when you factor the current debt with our population of 335 million at the moment. Back then, the U.S. owed most of that money to the government of France and domestic investors for their war materials. This debt steadily grew until 1835. That's when the U.S. started selling federally owned lands and it cut the federal budget. So this helped to shrink the national debt. But soon after, an economic depression hit the U.S., and U.S. debt started racking back up. Then came the American Civil War, and the national debt grew to more than 4,000%. That's right, I'm talking a shocking increase from $65 million just before the war in 1860 to $2.7 billion when the war ended 5 years later. Subsequent wars simply led to more and more debt. After World War II, national debt reached $22 billion. And since then, we've continued to borrow from other countries and investors to fund important programs and services. If you're wondering how we went from starting at $75 million in debt to $31 trillion in debt today, well, let me tell you. Major events like the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars and the 2008 Great Recession were major contributors. And don't forget the impact of the recent pandemic. When the pandemic hit the world, the U.S. economy took a massive hit. So the government went on a massive spending spree to help the country and its citizens. To spend this money, it had to borrow money. In fact, since 2020, outstanding debt has climbed almost $8 trillion. This borrowing spree started under Trump and continued well into the Biden administration. When the spree started, interest rates were low. Borrowing money was rather convenient, but right now, interest rates and inflation are higher than ever, and they don't appear to be getting better anytime soon. Believe it or not, estimates have found that from 2021 until 2031, President Biden's policies may end up adding yet another $4.8 trillion on top of the existing debt. Let's put it in perspective. When Barack Obama took office in January 2009, outstanding public debt was $10.6 trillion. By the time Donald Trump took office in January 2017, the national debt was $19.9 trillion. And by the time Joe Biden took office in January 2021, the national debt was already at $27.8 trillion. So you can see it continues to trend upwards. Analysts predict that the current debt may only start manifesting serious problems in 5 to 10 years. It's estimated by 2030, U.S. debt will be at least $50 trillion. And it seems like the bad news keeps piling up. You see, when we broke the $31 trillion mark, inflation was also over 8%. Since inflation is so high, the Federal Reserve promised to continue raising interest rates in the coming months in the attempt to lower prices across the board. But higher interest rates impacts also the rate the feds are borrowing with. This past May, the Congressional Budget Office projected that the U.S. annual cost and interest rate fees will be at least $399 billion by the end of the year. and by 2032 it's expected to exceed $1.2 trillion. This means future U.S. presidents will need to buckle down to make some really hard choices about Americans' budget and spending. But actually, that's still far from the end of the consequences of debt. The more the national debt increases, the more our economy will struggle. And a struggling economy means the value of our dollar may well go down. If and when that happens, the U.S. government will likely follow its pattern of selling more treasury bonds. But when investors see the U.S. economy declining like that, analysts expect them to be more cautious about buying U.S. bonds at all. It's even possible that countries may start getting rid of their U.S. assets. If you're wondering what President Biden does to reverse all this, well, it's technically possible. But realistically, it's unlikely. In 2021 and 2022, U.S. national debt grew over $3.2 trillion with Biden as president. And some estimate by the end of Biden's term in January 2025, U.S. national debt will go to $35 trillion. And if you think that's bad now, well, it's going to get even worse. Average Americans like you and I can expect climbing interest rates and rising national debt to hit our wallets hard. Now, of course, the government isn't going to ask each American to send them money, but we will feel the pain in our wallets when we need to take out a mortgage or a loan. Also, we can expect federal programs to get cut. If you think interest rates are high now, just wait. Truth be told, right now, it seems like Americans are ignoring the debt crisis. But I'm telling you, as prices and interest rates continue to grow and federal programs get cut, well, then that's when push comes to shove. And Americans won't ignore this debt by then. Let's talk about something closer to home, car loans. If you're wondering why car loans are so high as they are, well, remember, the Feds hiked up interest rates to combat inflation. New car prices reached a peak average of $48,301. In the most recent quarter, Americans who purchased cars took out the largest loans on record today. I'm talking an average car loan of $41,347 compared to $38,315 last year. But it's not all doom and gloom. In fact, thanks to decreasing competition and supply chain improvements, new car and car loan prices might see a decrease in the coming weeks and months. We just don't know how much of a decrease we can expect yet. But here's the thing, even if car prices do slightly improve, with so many Americans going into debt, some may still not be able to afford the loans to buy them. Some people believe that the new car market may transform into more of a luxury market since many aren't able to afford car prices being so high. Car manufacturers want money, and so it's possible that they may target buyers who can get better loans and pay higher prices despite growing economic instability. In the past 2 years, the number of consumers who choose car loans that were 48 months or shorter more than doubled. That's because in most cases, the shorter the loan, the lower the interest rates. So the industry may see a growing trend towards shorter loan terms. Right now, we're on the brink of recession. Most people understand a recession can be a condition where you see 2 quarters of negative economic growth combined with mass job losses and/or other negative factors. Well, in a recent survey, 84% of Americans said that they were concerned that a recession will start before this year ends. If a recession does happen, people will start trying to save every penny they can. Anyway, in that same survey, 76% of Americans said they already started making lifestyle changes to prepare for a likely recession. For example, they've started reducing their own personal debts. If you're wanting to be in that same boat, here's a few tips you can do to start reducing your own personal debt now. For starters, one practical thing you can do is start gathering some emergency savings. No one wants to lose their job or run out of cash before they can find a new job. Financial experts recommend having at least 6 to 12 months of income saved up just in case. And to store that money, some recommend opening a high-yield savings account. To start saving up an emergency reserve, you'll need to cut a few things out from your daily lifestyle. But some people aren't sure what to cut. The best way to start is by creating a budget. Some financial websites even have budget calculators you can use online. Once you type in all your expenses and earnings, these online calculators can actually tell you how much you should be spending in the best areas you can save in. And they'll even offer personalized suggestions on how to reduce current expenses and improve your budget. But now you tell me, are you concerned about the U.S. national debt? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.